welcome. Thanks for being here. It's awkward when there's people online and here because I'm not sure where to look always. But okay, so I am Brynn Bell. I'm the behaviorist and the social worker here at GWA. Today, our parent night is on family and home structure. These are some of the things that I'm going to be going over. I want to talk about 5 rules of parenting, so we'll hit all of those. Prevention and home structure, some things you can do to prevent problem behavior, positive reinforcement of desired behavior, punishment and extinction of undesired behavior, skill building, and relationship building.
I'll use your arrow.
Okay. One thing I want to just get out of the way up front is that behavior management and the techniques I'm going to be teaching tonight are based on like positive behavior intervention, which is not treatment for any psychiatric disorders. So if your child has a recognized psychiatric disorder, that should be referred to treatment. And that's some of these listed are some of the main ones that I would say need to be treated with a professional working with you and your family. The positive behavior management techniques I'll be teaching tonight will be helpful, but not fully effective for kids who have a disorder. You've got to be also treating that and dealing with that. And that's going to look a little bit different for kids with those disorders. So the basics of behavior, most people are familiar with. I think most people are familiar with the ABCs of behavior, right? Antecedent, behavior, consequences is the ABCs. Antecedent is just simply things that happen before the behavior. The behavior is what we can observe. And then consequences are what happen after. Some things to really keep in mind, though, that I think get missed with the ABCs of behavior is that antecedent strategies are environmental interventions that can be preventative. So we can put things in the environment, we can put strategies in place or responses happening in the environment to prevent behavior if we know kind of what is triggering a behavior for a kid or what demand or task placed on that kid is a problem or trigger. So we can kind of be preventative in how we approach things, how we structure that kid's environment. Antecedent triggers are anything that might happen that might trigger that behavior. So we can identifying those, and then trying to maybe eliminate them or decrease them or prepare the child for the trigger. That can also help with behavior management. The behavior then needs to be something that we can define, observe, and objectively measure. So if I'm working with a family and they say like the behavior is that our teenager is just really disrespectful, that needs to be broken down to like, what does that look like? What exactly are we talking? What's the physical behavior that we're observing? How can we objectively measure that? And then does your observation of disrespect the same as mine? Is it the same as your spouse? So can it be really objective? Can we identify it so that everyone is watching for and dealing with the same behavior? So that has to be you have to be really cautious about that. As you're thinking about your kids tonight, as we talk about behavior, you may want to go home and really define the behaviors you want to be targeting in your home, the behaviors that are positive, that you want to be building and seeing more of, the skills you want to be working on to like see different behavior, but also behaviors that are a problem, and really define those. Like, what are those? What do they look like? Really be a lot more specific. So that you can really target the behaviors individually. That's going to be a lot more effective than just saying like, oh, my kid is wild, or my kid is disrespectful, or my kid doesn't listen. Like, I would break it down to exactly what you're seeing and what you're observing in your child. Could you give an example?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, so I kind of confused, but it's like, so my daughter, if she doesn't get what she wants, she immediately goes into like wanting to hurt you. Does that make sense? Like, not hurt you physically, but like mentally. Is that an example?
Yeah, it's a great example. Okay, so we would say like, so an antecedent trigger we know is when things don't go her way, or she doesn't get what she wants, or the answer is no, right? That's her antecedent trigger that we know.
Is that like enough narrowed down too, or no?
No, I mean,
go a little bit more.
It's pretty good actually though, because it's semi-observable. Like, okay, so when that happens, then what we can observe in her is what I would ask you. Like, then what can we observe after that? What is it? Name calling? Is it saying things that are hurtful? Is it going and talking to little brother about you? You know what I mean? Like, what is the hurtful behavior that's happening?
Like her distinct behavior that happens after she doesn't get what she wants.
Yeah. Like, what does it look like? What does she do? And it can be a category of a few things, right? It can be like, well, sometimes she does this, sometimes she does this, but we just want to make sure they're all observable. And they might all be kind of that same category of like hurtful responses after she doesn't get her way. But we want to identify, what do they look like? Can we define them? Sometimes what I tell people is, think about if you're describing it to like a nanny or a babysitter, right? Because mom and dad, we know the behavior. We know it's so obvious to us. But if you were to describe it to like a babysitter who's going to deal with it, so it's got to be pretty observable, and it's got to be something that's like, okay, I have to make sure their version of it is what I want them addressing. Yeah. That makes sense. Behavior change is primarily a product of immediate environment. This is something that I think is challenging for people to recognize, because I think a lot of times people feel like behavior change is based solely on punishment, discipline, and like negative interventions following the behavior, or cost response following the behavior. But really, behavior change is a product of anything immediate happening in the environment after that behavior. But also anything in the immediate environment prior to that behavior. So there's a lot of things we need to target without even dealing with the child yet. Like, we need to first look at your responding, the environment and how it changes, the access that the behavior gets the child, what the environment is doing preventatively. And so there's a lot we can do to change behavior without actually even dealing with the child yet. Yes, we're going to deal with the child. Yes, we're going to teach and train, and we'll get into all of that. But there's a lot we can do to really shape and change behavior without even dealing with the child, with just dealing with our response and the environment. Then consequences are anything that occurs in the environment immediately after a behavior. Oftentimes we think of consequences as a punishment or a negative, but a consequence in the behavior world is just anything that occurs. That can be as simple as you did nothing, there's the consequence. You said nothing, you walked away. Okay, that's the consequence. Siblings left the room. That's the consequence. Or the demand was like taken away because you walked over and did the dishes instead, so whatever happened right after that behavior is what we want to look at and what we want to analyze. But depending on the consequence of that behavior, the behavior may increase or decrease depending on what it did for the child. That does not always mean that punishment will decrease a behavior, because that depends on what the child is seeking. Some kids will seek an emotional reaction from a parent, a yelling reaction, or a punishing reaction. Some kids will want that, and it will actually increase that behavior. So it depends what the child is seeking with that behavior. And so we have to really analyze the consequence of what they're getting and why it's not decreasing. Happy to have you. Okay, we're going to go over these 5 parenting rules, and we're going to go over them one at a time. So we'll break into those individually. The first one is, we need to have clear rules and clear non-negotiables in your home. If you've established, by the way, a lot of this, just let it be a really great reminder to you, because I think a lot of us, need a good reminder to like, oh yeah, I got to get back on that, or oh yeah, I've let that slide a little bit. But if you have not, these are some really amazing things to start with to really structure your home and start managing behavior in your home. Hold a family meeting and establish 3 to 5 family rules that encompass most of the expectations in your home, and then establish 3 to 5 non-negotiables in your home. That's the trickier part, because I think our non-negotiables list can get really long for our kids. And that also depends on your children's age. So 3 to 5 would be elementary school age appropriate. If you have teenagers, you could go a little bit more in depth into your non-negotiables and have a little bit longer list, but I would write them down. I would make them clear. I would work together to jointly establish those. That does not mean the kids get to create all the rules or figure out what's not negotiable. It just means it's a discussion and can be jointly established. Ultimately, like, the parents say is the final word, right? I can have a discussion with my kids all they want about sleepovers. Ultimately, my non-negotiable is we don't do sleepovers. That's not going to change, but that needs to be at least discussed and talked about. The whys presented to the kids, it's explained. That family meeting needs to be a joint effort to create those. So a lot of times those non-negotiables are not really up for debate, but in that meeting, it needs to be, at least they're presented, at least they're explained. Okay. Rules should state what to do, not what to refrain from doing. I'll give you some examples of those in a little bit. Establish what's available. So your reinforcement, either a program or privileges, what's available when the rules are followed. So think about this before you even sit down to meet as a family. Is like, what is available in our home if the kid is doing what they're asked, following the rules? What is the reinforcement offered? What is available to them? And we'll talk about reinforcement in a little bit, but we do need to make sure there is an established reinforcement. And it may need to be different for each kid. It may need to be different depending on what is valuable to each kid. And then establish what will happen, either punishment or denied privileges, when the rules are broken. So what will that look like? What will happen? And you want to establish that clearly because we want to be really clear and transparent. We want to let kids know ahead of time. This is our family rules. This is what's expected. If they are broken or you don't follow them, here's what will happen. So that there's no gray area, there's no question, there's no confusion. And then when a rule is broken, you have already established what your response is going to be, and you've already established what you're going to do about it. Explain that the rules are required to be in the shared areas of the home. Shared areas of the home are typically the office, the living room, the kitchen, right? If you have a game room or a loft, the yard, those are shared areas of the home. The rules are required to be in the shared areas of the home. If you choose to not follow the rules, you're welcome to go to your bedroom, okay? If the rules are just not, you're not having it today, that's fine. You're welcome to go to your bedroom. Bedrooms are a place to take a break and get ready to follow the family rules. As soon as you're ready to follow the family rules, you're welcome to come back out. But that is the expectation. That is the boundary that we hold, is the shared areas of the home. You need to be following our rules. Any questions so far? Okay. Awesome. Possible examples of family rules. Like I mentioned, you want to have 3 to 5, but you want to make them so they encompass quite a bit of your expectations in your home so that your kids can memorize the family rules. I'd still visually put them up on the wall somewhere, but you don't want to have a list this big because it's very difficult for them to then name them off. For you to name them off in the moment, you're going to want to memorize yours as well, because in the moment when you're correcting or addressing behavior, you want to tie it back to that rule. You want to be like, oh, that's our family rule. Remember, blah, 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 blah. That's not okay. So these are some examples. All of these are worded in a way to tell the child what to do, not what to stop doing, what to not do. So we want to give them very clear words of what to do and what we expect. So this will be available to all of you, and you can go through some of those and look at them. You can also establish some of your own. Okay, oh, sorry, let me just say, and so these would be what's required in the shared areas of the home. If you want to go in your room and like yell in your pillow or call me a jerk really loudly, that's fine, right? The family rule is not expected in your bedroom to a point. Of course, safety and property expectations are probably going to extend to the bedroom, but it's good to have a space where they can go and get their anger out or express some of that or be upset. Or even be unkind, and it's allowed because no one else is around. If that makes sense. Okay, your non-negotiables are expectations that are black and white. This is different than rules. These are just really clear. These are just not up for debate.
We have a question. Sorry.
Go ahead.
She's saying, if the kid goes to their room, don't they need to keep the family rules if it has to do with keeping your voice down or not hurting the house, etc.? And then she said, got it. I guess you answered.
Okay, yeah. I would say property and safety would be yes. Like if you're kicking the heck out of your bedroom door, I actually would put a kick plate on it, to be honest. If that's a continual problem, I'd put a kick plate up, put a metal kick plate on that door. But yeah, like you can't go in your room and put holes in the door, in the walls and the door and stuff. So property and safety, yes. But can they yell and be angry and whatever? I would say yes. They need a space to be able to do that without having to maintain full control or even a little bit of control because of their age, right? Because of their age and development, it's not very, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not very appropriate to expect that they are going to maintain appropriate volume all the time or appropriate words all the time. So giving them time to be like, you can go and yell at me in there. Yeah.
So what if they have siblings that share the room?
Super tricky. I
Yeah,
do feel
like
like you have to establish in that family meeting, where is everyone going to go? Like you have to kind of establish that, like, okay, so we're going to sit down and go through everyone. Oh, where's your area going to be? Where's your space going to be where you go to take your break, right? And we'll talk a little bit about that break space. Maybe I put it on there. No, I did not yet. We'll talk a little bit about that break space. But yeah, where are you going to go to take your break? What are you going to do if your sibling's in there, right? What are you going to do if you're in there and your brother comes in upset and he needs his break, you know? And so you can establish that as a family. Some families I've had, the sibling who's in there has to leave. Like, sorry, he needs a break. It's best that you walk out. It's best that you take some time and come find mom or something else. Depending on the kids, some will stay. It depends on if, oh, he's just going to yell and kind of be mad at his pillow, like, okay, so you can stay. It really depends on that behavior, right? If you think your child's going to get aggressive, it would be best to definitely have his siblings not stay in that room or establish a different break space for that kid. Yeah. But break spaces can be really up to the kid as far as under your stairs in a closet. Yeah. That seems like crazy, but you know, a place where they can just go and be alone.
Yeah, a parent's room. Like, so if the kid's in there having a moment, just if you need a moment, go to the parents' room. That's like in my head, that's the solution. So
yes, and that's very possible for sure. And I don't know where I get to. Where do I get to the break space? The break space, I know it's in here somewhere. The break space needs to be, it does not need to be a sterile environment. So it doesn't need to be empty of anything and punishing or boring. It simply needs to be a non-reinforcing environment. So no screen time, no availability of television or games or something like that. No availability of really high reinforcing toys or socializing.
Well, this is my question. So my daughter, like, okay, I'm like trying to see if I can answer this in my head, but my daughter loves to draw.
So good, I'm getting to that.
Would that be...
So it can have access to tools for coping.
Okay, is that...
So drawing, reading, puzzles, Legos for some kids if they're not highly reinforcing. Some kids love Legos, I would not allow that. So if it's highly reinforcing, that's not in the break space. But in the break space, stuffed animals, right? A special blanket. There can be coping tools in the break space. So their bedroom is fine. If it's like, oh, but their stuff's all in there. That's fine, as long as it's not highly reinforcing toys and things like that. You would want to
things. Is that what you mean? By
yes.
Like
Really
rewarding them.
Really rewarding things. Okay. Yes. So it's okay for them to go learn to cope, go learn to use your tools, go ahead in your bedroom and use the stuff that helps you comfort yourself or helps you calm down, but not necessarily go access a reward. So be cautious of like, okay, let's think about our break spaces in our home. What does that look like? Some kids love to like go out in the backyard and be under a tree or on the tramp or something like that. It just depends on like what's highly reinforcing to your kid. If it's like that's just calming and helpful for your kid to go in the backyard, walk around, be under a tree, perfect. If it's like, oh, they love the backyard and the trampoline's their favorite thing, then that's probably not where they go for their break, because the break is a time to go think about what you're doing, think about the family rules, figure out coping, and get yourself ready to follow the family rules. That makes sense? Mm-hmm. Did you have a question?
I was just going to say it's kind of like establishing a wellness center in your home.
Yes.
It's a space where they can regulate.
Yeah.
Should we ever get like pictures or a list of what you guys have in your wellness space that we could maybe put in our wellness spaces at home?
Yes, that's a good idea.
Like kids' favorite things in there that are like calming, but not.
That's a great idea. I mean, there's so many, it just depends on a kid, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so non-negotiables, like I said, these are just clear, non-negotiable. There's just no up for debate or discussion. We kind of all have these because they're a part of our family's culture. These just have to be very clear to your kids and pre-established. And that's why they're part of this family meeting. These would be more like, these are not family rules. Like family rules are going to be what's expected to just be in the shared areas of the home and just engaging with each other in the way that we expect. So family rules are much more dealing with like respect and how we treat each other and how we treat our home. Okay. Non-negotiables are the nitty-gritty of like, well, but also in our home, there are some non-negotiables. Like you attend school regularly and you maintain passing grades, right? That's not going to be a family rule. That's just a black and white expectation. That's one of our non-negotiables. You do not enter closed doors of bedrooms or bathrooms without permission. We do not permit swearing. We do not permit sleepovers. Then these are like what we expect from you at home. Older kids, you answer your phone when your parents call or you call them back quickly, right? If you're out for the night with friends and I'm trying to get a hold of you and you're not answering, we have a problem. That's a non-negotiable. And bedtimes should be a non-negotiable or established. Electronics turned in and electronic rules should be a non-negotiable and established. Like I said, 3 to 5 is hard because we have a lot of them. I want these to be your big ones, your big top dogs that are like, these are going to be the ones that we are really focusing in on and holding our kids really accountable for. And then there's going to be clear pre-established consequences for breaching those, right? What happens if? What happens if the kid keeps his phone? What happens if they don't answer their phone when they're out? What happens if they don't get their stuff done after school? What happens if you go to work and they slept in or skipped school and missed the bus? You know, these are things you want to not wait until it happens to figure out what your response is going to be. These are things you want to pre-establish together as a couple or as a parent, what your response is going to be, what that consequence is going to be. So that these things are all outlined and clear and established long before the behavior occurs and long before your emotions get involved. Because then it's really hard. This is a list of things. I hope it's comprehensive, but I probably missed some things, but I tried to brainstorm all the areas of the home that should really be structured with some clear expectations. If I work with a family, a lot of my questions up front are about these things and how clear it is for the kids. What's your rules on this? What's it look like? What is the electronic use of the home? What's the access like? What are the boundaries? If you have teenagers or drivers, what's their vehicle use look like? What is it expected if they're outside of your home as far as like curfew or behavior? If you have family meals together, are there expectations or specific boundaries with food in your pantry, food in your kitchen, meal time? School behavior, grades, school performance. Is that something that you address? Is that something that, as far as your family culture goes, there's boundaries and expectations there? What are your morning routine expectations? You know, so lots of these need to be addressed. If you're looking at this list, like we haven't really clearly established expectations in these areas, I would really start figuring out those things and just kind of trying to make them more clear. Because if you haven't established clear structure and clear expectations in these areas, then when problems occur and the child's getting in trouble, they're getting in trouble for something that's not really quite been explained or clear or transparent yet. So that's problematic. So, and this is, like I said, based on family culture. So if some of these are like, oh, we're pretty lax on that, or that's not a big deal to us, or that's not an issue for us, then that's no problem. It doesn't mean you have to be strict on all of these. That makes sense. This is all your culture. Okay, I'm gonna just let you guys go ahead and read these, but these are some lists of ways to really establish structure in the home that's going to help your child be more successful in your home in following expectations and knowing what they're supposed to be doing, in helping them establish the skills that they need to really be successful in your home, but remembering also that your home is the perfect practice place for adulting, right? And life. And so it's not just successful in our home, it's successful in their next step. So we want to look at like, what skills does this child still need when they move out, when they get a job, when they're adulting? So our home really is the practice place for all of these things. And if we're building all of this, they're going to be more successful teenagers, more successful adults. This is ways where you can build in some of the behavior management and positive behavior techniques and intervention strategies into just your family's lifestyle, right? If you're having like a family night once a week, maybe you do some skill-based, value-based behavior work. Maybe you embed behavior topics into some of your discussions or your family activities. Maybe you have a regular family meeting where you go over the family rules again, you go over the expectations, you know. And I love having like a family motto or statement that we repeat regularly. You may, if you're having significant or higher behavior issues in your home, you may want to even establish a family contract or behavior agreement. And that's a little bit more structured and serious, but it's really effective and can be great. You might even want to make it fun and have like weekly challenges for the family or competitions where we're targeting a specific behavior. Can everyone for the week work on getting up on time to their alarm and getting out the door on time? You know, we're going to have a challenge, we're going to work on it. And if the family does it, we have a prize or something like that. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm like, maybe I need therapy after watching this, but so let's say like yelling. So we did like, you know, 1 day since our last yelling incident. I'm just asking this to see like you can give my input if this is healthy or if I should start over. So if I did like 0 days till our last per kid, and then like if we made it a whole week without yelling, we could get ice cream. Is that like a positive thing, or is that like would that be?
It's perfect, except the only change I would do is target what you want them doing.
Okay.
So instead of like, it's been a day since we've been yelling.
Not supposed to, what they should be doing. Okay, yeah.
Like, okay, well, if for the week, we can all have really good volume and talk nice to each other, you know, realistically, then we get ice cream, you know, so like, oh, wow, guys, look, we've gone a whole day with good volume and you guys have been in control of your volume, you know, so it's much more focused on what you're working on, what they're doing, instead of like, hey, we've gone without yelling. So that's not really telling them what to do.
Yeah.
Here's what I expect from you, and here's what I want you doing for the week. I want you controlling your mouth, listening when I prompt you to control your volume. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that way you're also prompting them. You're like, oh, you're getting loud. What's the, you know, what's our challenge this week? What are we working on?
Yeah,
be careful. So you're not correcting. You're not, oh, that's yelling. Don't yell. You know what I mean? So you're prompting and coaching instead of correcting, because we have a goal instead of we have something we're not doing and we're punishing, if that makes sense. Rule number 2, ignore inconsequential behavior. This is probably one of the most difficult things I have found for a lot of families, and especially families with teenagers. Ignore does not mean we can't talk about it. It doesn't mean we can't work on it or discuss it or skill build. It just means we're not targeting it with reinforcement and punishment. These are the things that are like, pick your battles. This may not be something you want to punish because you have bigger fish to fry. You don't want to be punishing everything that drives you crazy or annoys you about your child, because we need to look at really targeting very important safety and household issues. So some of these are examples that might drive you a little crazy, but are probably not necessarily the best things to target with reinforcement or punishment. Some of these are because they're going to fade, right? Trends fade, they change. They're going to move on from that hairdo that you hate. You can remind and coach and help with poor eating habits, but probably not something to punish. Those are things that are like, these are pretty age appropriate for what developmental stage they're in. And bad attitude, complaining and eye rolling, mocking, those are hard ones. Those are really hard for people to ignore, super hard. But those are also things that if you are sticking to really structured environmental behavior rules, consequences, and pre-established things, it doesn't matter what their attitude is. It doesn't matter what they're saying or complaining. It doesn't matter if they're eye rolling at me. I'm still in charge, and this has all been pre-established. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't change the outcome. It doesn't change my response. That's why I don't need to target it, which is great, because what you're also showing kids is that is not a powerful behavior. It doesn't do anything. Not powerful. So every time you're responding to a behavior, remember that you are teaching that kid whether it's powerful or not. We want to make sure we're not teaching a kid that just junk behavior is powerful and is going to get a reaction, a change, a response, or control of my emotions or power in the environment. That makes sense. Yeah.
I was curious, can we have access to the slide?
Yes, you will for sure. Okay. Okay, sorry, I don't know what that means. The messy room is a tough one. These are things you want to support, teach, help, and train, but not target as a problem behavior. I hope that makes sense. There are going to be behaviors that they throw out that are meant to distract you. They're meant to get you off target. So if you are like, you haven't done the dishes, we need to get to the sink now and do the dishes, they're going to possibly start throwing out some behavior like, you're such a jerk. Oh my gosh, so-and-so didn't do them last night, blah, 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 right? That is junk behavior that we're ignoring because I'm not addressing that. And it might feel really strange to be like, wow, they're really mouthy and calling me names. And I'm ignoring that. But the problem is that behavior is meant to distract you. It is meant for you to delay the getting to the sink to the dishes. And so you need to stay on your follow through. Whatever you are on and currently dealing with, don't let their behavior distract and get you on a tangent. You can just simply say, we're not talking about that right now. We're talking about the dishes. They're not done. Let's go. So there's a lot of junk behavior kids will throw out to really just like blame or distract or get you off track. Make sure that you are never distracted from your follow through. That's a family rule. You need to be following our family rules to be out here in the shared area. You need to head to your room. Oh, but this and this and this, and then swearing, right? Using name calling, which we want to address because like, oh my goodness, but I would, that's not what we're dealing with right now. You need to go to your room. I was very clear, right? Family rules are very clear. You need to head. I've been very clear about where you need to go, get going so that it's not a way for them to use poor behavior to control your response and to get you off response. Makes sense? Junk behavior is hard. It's very difficult to ignore, but very important that we ignore it and stay on track with what we've established as the behaviors we're targeting. We're not targeting these junk behaviors. They're not worth it. We're targeting bigger things that are family rules. Okay, selectively reinforce desired behavior. This is super important. Reinforcement is huge. Okay. Any behavior typically, not always, but any behavior that receives attention or an emotional response, especially from parents, will likely increase. I want you to really think about that. So I was working with a family and they said they were really struggling with their daughter being extremely unkind to siblings, like really personally attacking them and making them feel belittled. And I'm like, well, what do you do when she says something like that to sister or brother? And they said, well, we pull her aside and talk with her and da-da-da. And I said, so when she's engaging in really poor behavior, you're ignoring the other two and pulling her aside and giving her one-on-one attention. That's a problem. She is very attention seeking. And so that is getting her the attention from her parents she wants, and it's going to increase. You're going to see more of that behavior. So you have to be really, really careful because it feels like you're doing the right thing, right? That seems like, wow, that's coaching and teaching. That's great parenting. It's tricky because we have to be cautious of what we're reinforcing. So be very careful. Whatever you're giving attention to is likely to increase. Whatever you're giving an emotional response to, even if it's negative, even if I'm yelling, I'm getting upset, I'm engaging with you in any way, positive or negative, that's likely to increase the behavior. So we have to be very careful what kind of attention we're giving. And then be careful that there is a time and place for connection and relationship building. But when a child is exhibiting inappropriate behavior, it's not the time. So if a child is in the middle or had just exhibited an inappropriate behavior, it's not the time to sit and chat about it. It's not the time to coach, teach, talk to them, explore why they did it, validate feelings. There is time to connect and do that, but when they're exhibiting inappropriate behavior, all we do is establish the consequence. That's it. The consequence does the talking. We do not engage at that time because attention is so valuable to kids. That's not the time to give them attention. You'll be reinforcing the behavior that you do not want to see increase. So your response, that's why I love pre-establishing your response. The response can be scripted practically. That's a family rule. You know you have to have a safe body. You need to head to your room until you're ready to follow the family rules. I'm all done. We're not talking about this. It's not a discussion. I'm not teaching and training right now. Does that make sense? Which is hard because we want to be like, oh, where did this come from? Why are you doing this? Let's talk about it. That's great. Do it later. That's not when we do it. When they're engaged in a core behavior, they don't get that from us. They don't get much from us at all. They get a non-emotional response that's already pre-established of what will happen when you do what. Make sense? Okay, I have some parents who struggle with wanting to reinforce with extrinsic things like objects, stickers, privileges, screen time, etc., because they want children to function on an intrinsic motivation. Couple things, intrinsic motivation has to be paired with extrinsic to be powerful. We are born as survivors. Our human nature is to survive and get our needs met. So it's actually not intrinsically, it's not naturally powerful for us to want to achieve and succeed, etc. Those first have to be felt and experienced, and then they become like, whoa, that feels good. Whoa, that's awesome. Whoa, I got recognized. So those things first have to be practiced and established. Childhood is a great time to do that. Childhood is a great time to start rewarding your kids for positive behavior, to show that that behavior has value and that behavior has worth, right? Working hard has value. Listening has value. Following instructions has worth to you. So you're teaching that pattern so that later they can be more intrinsically motivated. But right now as kids, that's not age appropriate to expect. The other thing is to remember that all of us are intrinsically motivated, but it's limited for all of us. Because like I love helping students. I love helping families. I get my bucket full with working at the school, but I'm also probably not going to come if they don't pay me, right? All of those things are intrinsic and they are there. I love my job and I have so many intrinsic motivators for it, but it's still, most of us want that paycheck because it shows that our work is valued. It shows that we are worth something. And it really helps our identity, right? So don't be afraid of extrinsic motivators. They're not a dangerous thing if done correctly. They are still something that you function under as adults. It's okay to extrinsically motivate your kids and reinforce them. Okay, reinforcement of well-established skills. If your kid can do this, it's well-established, they're great at it, they know how to do it. That can be intermittent, social, and quick. For example, if your kid does great with this neighbor kid playing at a play date, they do great, they get along great, perfect. I'm not going to reinforce during that play date. At the end of it, I might say, gosh, you're such a great friend. I heard you guys, you got along so well. Way to go. That's going to be quick, not great, not big reinforcement because that's a skill that kid already has. However, if that child does not get along well with their brother and during a play date, they're doing okay with their brother, I'm going to be a lot more reinforcing. Okay, because that's a skill that child doesn't have all the time. So if you're still building a skill, then your reinforcement needs to be a lot more immediate, a lot more consistent, probably more structured and intentional, and more powerful. So social reinforcement or praise, great. I have a lot of parents who are like, well, can't it just be social reinforcement and praise? That's my kids just do it because they want to, which is fine if the skill is well established. If your kid can totally do this skill, it's easy, they do it all the time, it's not a major effort for your kid, you can just be like, great job. But if it's a skill you're still building or your kid is still struggling with or a behavior your kid is still struggling with, you're probably going to need to step up the reinforcement. Yeah.
Say you have a 7-year-old that when you try and reinforce and be like, good job, she just goes, whatever. And like super rude about it.
So that's just simply exploring reinforcement that's valuable to your kid.
Okay.
Praise and social reinforcement might be not valuable or even embarrassing or even uncomfortable. We definitely have kids that are like, oh my gosh, do not say that to me, you know. Don't worry, because everyone is reinforced with different things and it changes with different phases they're in, it changes with different moods they're in.
I'm just trying to figure out a different reinforcement.
I will give you a list.
No, I don't want to ice cream every night.
That's the reinforcement of the skill you're building. She cares about the sugar and treats.
There you go.
The language she speaks.
And if some of these are not, if your intrinsic or social motivators, which are more natural, are not well established for your kid or they don't like them, you just pair it with something they like.
Okay.
So that it's like, I'm going to give you what you like, but I'm also going to say, that was really good. Good job. Even if they're like, whatever, but it's okay. I'm going to keep pairing it with what you like so that we can pair it to be a positive thing. Like praise is positive. but we might have to teach that. This is also, so reinforcement is different depending on the skill level of a kid. So this is why reinforcement will be different across different kids in your home, and it will be different across developmental stages. Okay, so you might have a kid who's being reinforced on a program for turning in homework or keeping their grades up, and another kid who's a straight A, that's super easy for them. Not going to have a reinforcement program for you. Some of the kids will be upset with that, like, why does he get this? Because it's a skill we're still building. Everyone's different. Developmentally, it's not a skill you need to build on. Let's work on what you need to build on.
They're asking, can you, oh, there it is. Never mind.
Oh yeah, we'll get to it. Okay, so
Types of extrinsic motivation.
Top of the list. Look at that.
here are some types of reinforcement you can use, right? Food and consumables are immediate and they're pretty powerful for most kids. There are some downfalls to that. They can satiate. They're not supernatural or great to generalize, right? Like their teachers are probably not going to hand out marshmallows if your kid's in the 4th grade, you know? So also age, it's like, okay, eventually we got to move you off of this. Unless it's a natural part of your family's culture, right? If dessert after dinner is a natural part, that's easy. We can do that till the kid is 17, right? But if it's like, I'm giving you Smarties in a jar, you just have to make sure you're thinking about your child's age and if it's appropriate and when can we be like, it needs to be a little more age appropriate. Social is great. And that can sometimes be just as powerful for some kids. Some kids, it's not as much. So you have to be cautious of knowing, is it going to be powerful? Does it work for my kid? Always pair it with social praise and help them see why you're giving them the Smarties or whatever. And it's easy to administer. Privileges and activities. There's some examples here of privileges and activities. These should be highly reinforcing activities that they love. These are tricky because they're a little bit more difficult to administer and monitor, right? So access to things and privileges, that is going to take more parental brain time and more parental organization to monitor and have it be part of our reinforcement that we're doing. There's also sometimes limitations of availability. So you got to be careful of that and making sure, like, is it going to be available? Tokens, which could be points, poker chips, stars on a chart, stickers on a chart, tickets that you're giving them, money, fake money that they turn into you later, marbles in a jar. There's a ton of ways you can do tokens. They need to be backed by another reinforcer, because sometimes it'll be like, oh, they earned stickers on their chart. And I'm like, great, what happens when the chart is full? Like, okay, then it's probably not gonna be very powerful. It might be for the first chart, like, oh, it's exciting to get stickers, but eventually it's gonna be like, yeah, I don't care anymore. So make sure it's backed by another reinforcer, right? What is it turned in for? What do they eventually turn that in for? And it does require an exchange to happen, and it does require organized management. So that is a little bit more intense or intentional than these, which are easy. But these two also move your kid into a more developmentally appropriate state and a higher, more natural state of reinforcement. Examples. Oh wait, just kidding. I'll give you examples. Some ideas for possible reimbursement. There's so many, you guys, but here are some ways that you can think a little bit outside the box, maybe in ways that you can reinforce and things that you might think like, we've tried a lot, they're not powerful for my kid. Well, maybe here's some different ideas that you haven't tried. I'll make sure you guys get this PowerPoint. If reinforcement is not increasing the positive behavior, here's some questions to ask yourself and some things to really look at. Okay, I'm going to send you that, but these are things to go down and really consider. What is maybe happening that's making it so the reinforcement isn't working, because it really should be working unless there's a problem for the reinforcement. An appropriate, if you're going to do a sticker chart or tokens, like an economy in your home, an appropriate amount of time for a child to go before being rewarded. For younger than kindergarten, it should be hourly. That doesn't mean you're giving your kid an hourly reward. It just means that you're targeting for an hour that behavior. So, hey, from like 4 until dinner, 4 to 5, if you do this and this, then the reward.
Rather than the whole day.
Right.
Okay.
So it just means like take about an hour to target a specific behavior and structure that with your kid. And that's about as long as you can really have them going to earn if they're pre-K. K through kindergarten through 2nd, they could go about half of the day or a full day, depending on the kid. 3rd grade and up should probably be able to do something more that's like earning throughout the week, and the reward comes on Friday or on the weekend. This is clearly sometimes different depending on the kid, but this is an average of like your neurotypical child. So if you're like, wow, my kid does not function on that long of a wait time, then we might want to look at your child's impulse control and talk about that. So you could contact me if you feel like that's way off with one of your kids. Okay. These are some ways to make sure that a reinforcement program is successful. You may be saying like, I've tried that, I've tried this, I've tried the prize box, I've tried, screen time, I've tried these things, but there are some things that maybe are making it so it's not as effective. So you'll want to read through those and consider some of those things that make it really successful. Rule number 4, you need to stop problem behavior and respond to it consistently. So if behavior against the family rules happens, you have a pre-scripted non-emotional response, like I kind of modeled already, right? Reminding them of the rule and then requiring them to retreat to a non-shared area of the home. All of that's been pre-established, so I don't have to get emotional when my kid engages in really poor behavior, which is hard because we're like, what are you doing? And we get upset, especially like, I feel like my mama bear comes out if my kid is hurting another one of my kids. So it's really great to have that pre-scripted response so that I can hold in my emotions and not respond with emotion, because that doesn't go very well. This is a forced break. This is not a, you should probably take a break, or maybe you need a break. Like, this is a forced break. This is you've broken a rule. You're clearly showing us you need a break. I don't care if you want to or not. This is a forced break. Now, that break is, oh, that's where I talk about it. There you go. There's your break space stuff about what can be there. That break is not a timed break. This is not a timeout. I don't like timeout because timeout is based on an arbitrary amount of time that you've established, not based on the child's behavior and readiness and skill, right? So this is a behavior break that's forced until that child is ready to follow family rules. If that takes 2 minutes, great. Are you ready to follow rules? Great, fantastic. That's all we need. If that takes 45 minutes, great. Let me know when you're ready.
Is that normal? I mean, it's normal in my house, but is it
Yeah.
normal?
Yeah. And it's normal for them to come out and be like, I'm ready. I'm ready. I hate you people. No, you're not ready. You're showing us you're not ready, right? You're still telling us you hate our family and don't want to be here. You need to head back till you're ready, So you just tie it back to like, that's still our family rules. You need to head back, which can become a back and forth fight. And this can be pretty ugly. I'll be honest, at first, while you're establishing this, because change is hard, and taking back full control of the household and showing kids that they're not in charge when they've had a little bit of leeway here is going to create an increase in behavior first before it gets better. But still worth it, in my opinion, because once you have this like running like a well-oiled machine, they get pretty used to the idea that like, it's non-negotiable. You're taking your break. It needs to happen now.
We have a question. What if they refuse to go to their break?
Depends on their age. If they are young enough to move physically, I would do that. Usually what I prompt is, you can choose where you go for a break, or I can choose, pick one. If they choose, they get to go where they want to. That can help if a child refuses to go. So giving them a choice of like, you choose where the break is or I do. That might help a kid like, okay, I'll get up and go. And then I'm going to choose the trampoline, which is a little more reinforcing, but okay. Like, as long as you are out of the shared areas and nobody's around you. So giving them that option of like, you choose or I choose, but if you're not moving, it's my choice, let's go. And then my choice is boring. Or like, I prompt also like, you need to take a break. I can help you, or you can do it on your own. If I have to help you, then there's going to be a consequence, right? If I have to help you, then whatever, like maybe a lost privilege. That's where the reinforcement program comes in really powerfully, because you can do some cost response. If I have to help you to go take your break, that's a token. That makes sense. Like, then I can tap into that reinforcement and do a takeaway. Or if I have to help you go take your break and you're not going willingly, then that's 10 minutes off screen time. So you've got to have something in your back pocket that's a reinforcement. That's why reinforcement is so huge. And when your kids are little, it can be simple as like, oh gosh, you know what? I guess sprinkles are a non-option tonight if you don't head to your break on that ice cream, right? Maybe the ice cream isn't taken away, but sprinkles are not an option, So things that can be like, sorry, that's Not gonna happen if you don't hit your brake. Now that's if you can move the kid and they're small, right? And you can easily, without any physical harm, escort the kid or even move the child to the brake space. That also does sometimes require, which sounds crazy hard, but it does sometimes require holding a door closed as well. That sounds like harsh, but in all reality, this is kind of like a timeout. It's a forced break. You are not to be out in the shared areas until you can follow the rules. If you're kicking and screaming, you are not safe. You do not be in the shared areas of the home. So that does sometimes require that I hold the doorknob or say, let me know when you're ready. I'm listening for calm. And I just listen. And as soon as they're calm, great. Glad you're calm. Let go of the doorknob. Now, older kids are harder by far, of course. Like older kids gets a lot more complex. Older kids, there's got to be a lot more pre-established things that are going to happen. We have to have these conversations with them. Like, okay, what if you refuse to go on your break? What's going to be the consequence of that? Establish that with them, and they have to jointly maybe do a contract with you where we establish some of that. So that does get tricky with older kids, and I can help you with individual cases if that's the case. I hope that answered it. It is hard with older kids because you can't necessarily move them, so you have to have some sort of cost response. I typically recommend your kid doesn't have to be perfect every instant. So I typically recommend doing a verbal reminder, which is just a prompt or a question like, oh, do you remember our family rule number 2? Or hey, is that a safe body? And then a verbal warning next. So they keep doing it. That's just a calm verbal reminder, just a reminder. Verbal warning is next. That is not a safe body. What I'm seeing you do is a breaking of rule 2. This is a warning. So verbal reminder, then a verbal warning, then removal. Okay, so example is here. Our family rules that we have a safe body, remember? That's the reminder. Then your hands are unsafe. It has to stop now. That's a warning. And then you're showing me that you cannot follow the family rules, so you need to be away from other people. Let's go. Okay. Remember the goal of punishment. It has to be to reduce the behavior and to build necessary skills. It is not to address some concept of personal justice where you feel violated or some violation has occurred, because that's when you're bringing in emotions, and that's when punishment can get dangerous, intense, excessive, and not really even connected or arbitrary, not really a teaching punishment, if that makes sense. That's when it can be like, that doesn't even make sense. So when it's becoming personal to you, take a break as a parent, because the goal of punishment has to be to reduce the behavior and to build skill. If you're like, oh, I just want to hit this kid because it's getting that like, oh, this is really offensive to me, take a break, because that kind of punishment is not going to be helpful or useful. It also needs to be delivered in a non-emotional state. That's hard to do. It's really hard to do. The focus needs to be teaching, training the kid, and having the child learn and grow. So make sure you're thinking in terms of consequences instead of punishment. Like, what is the consequence we are putting in place for that child to learn? Not like, how are we going to make sure that they feel this and they are punished in a way that's upsetting and hurtful to them so they don't do this again. That's when you're looking at like justice and getting into a space that's not great. Sorry, I'm going to grab a drink really quick. Okay, so during poor behavior, when they are in the middle of poor behavior, like I said, it's not a time to have conversation. It's not a time to connect or discuss. It's not a time to nurture. It is not a time to hold them, touch, affection. That will be reinforcing. Also, do not question the child about their inappropriate behavior. This is a big thing I see all the time. Do not ask them why. Do not question them about their behavior. You're either encouraging them to lie, and you will teach that behavior. You'll teach them to just lie. Or you're strengthening the behavior by giving it attention, especially if attention is valuable to your kid. Just don't talk about it, don't ask questions. And it's usually useless. The answers you get are pretty useless, right? Why did you hit your brother? I mean, what answer is really going to help you, right? It doesn't matter. Hitting is against our family rules. You need to go. Even if it's like, well, he hit me first. Oh, but hitting is against our family rules. You chose to break a rule. You need to go. He chose to, and I'll deal with him. But you know what I'm saying? Like, it's not a conversation time, and I'm not going to ask questions. It's useless to ask those kind of questions. And most kids don't even know why or can't verbalize why. And we don't need to have that discussion for them to learn. Kids learn from consequences. They learn from patterns in the environment. I don't even necessarily have to talk about any of this if I'm consistent in my responding and my consequences. Like I said, don't let them pull you off course with discussions of blame or justice or fairness. Your teens will try and do this, your tweens, right? They'll try and pull in that like, oh, justice and fairness and you're so mean and blah, blah, blah. Don't let them pull you off course like, oh, we're not talking about that right now. That is not what we're doing. We're doing this. Also junk behavior, just ignore it if you can, because most of it is stuff that doesn't need to be addressed in the moment when we're dealing with the other behavior we're dealing with. Later, after the consequences have occurred and everyone has calmed down, then you can discuss, you can teach, you can validate, you can ask questions, you can say, hey, when I talked to you, you were really disrespectful. The names you called me were not okay. You and I have a better relationship than that. Let's talk about it. But that's way later. Later, after you have put a consequence in place, those have occurred and we've calmed down. I love this program because it allows you as a parent to not engage when you're emotional. You can do it later when you can really do a good job and focus on their learning and not your emotions, right? You really hurt my feelings. It's not about that. It's not about you. You need to learn how to treat me because I respect you and you respect me. You know what I mean? It's got to be about them and not about us.
We have a question
Yes.
about reinforcement. She says, I understand reinforcement, but is it not like telling children that their behaviors are only driven by rewards? I do this, so I get this. Is it really good?
Well, okay. Can someone help me understand what she's asking?
Yeah, can you read it again, please?
I understand reinforcement, but is it not like telling children that their behaviors are only driven by rewards?
So is it all extrinsic? Like, is it all like, I will get this if I do this?
Okay.
That's it.
That
That's all
you,
there is to it.
you can
That's what
only
I'm trying
do
to say.
behavior because you're going to be rewarded.
Yeah, you're doing everything.
Is that what it is?
Yes, it's like, you
Hold
know,
on, she's
like,
talking.
example, yeah, sorry, I didn't know if I could talk in. So
Yeah.
like my house, I'm very strict with like screen time, right? They watch really screen time. So I start sometimes telling them, okay, if you guys do the piano practice first and, you know, fix the rooms, then you can maybe on a Saturday watch a movie. They do it because they love watching the movie because I'm not allowing them doing a lot of screen time. I'm just wondering, okay, so the entire behavior is driven by the fact that I let them watch movies. I mean, it's very easy with small kids. If they get what they want, if I start telling them I'm going to give you candies, they're going to do everything I tell them. So I'm like, I don't know. Is it really good? It feels like their behaviors are driven by rewards instead of the self-knowledge that this is a good thing. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So what you need to ask yourself is, when will that behavior become valuable to that child? So when will having a clean room or an organized space or a peaceful, calm environment become valuable to that child? Maybe at 19. Right? But we're building that. We're building them understanding there's value, you feel better. And you're even reminding that like, oh, doesn't it feel so nice in your room now? Don't you love the feeling of this clean room? We're building that because right now that behavior isn't valuable to them. They don't really care like we do. Right? You want to make sure you're reinforcing a behavior that you care about because it's valuable to you, but it's not so valuable to your kid. That's where it becomes like really ineffective to be like, well, I just want them to do this because it's important, but it's important to you. So you have to remember that. Is the behavior valuable and important to them? If not, we probably have to reinforce it. If grades is not important or valuable to a kid, they don't care, like, I don't care if I'm failing everything. We probably need to attach some reinforcement to the grades. Now, at what point will grades become valuable to them? Hopefully, eventually, as they're feeling successful,
Right.
feeling achievement, they're experiencing that clean room, or they're experiencing progress on the piano. Those behaviors will become more valuable to that kid.
Okay.
So intrinsic motivation will be built, but it takes time.
Okay. I
So,
understand better now.
Not bad to be attaching a reinforcement to behavior you want happening, because most of the time the behavior we want happening is not super valuable or important to the kid.
Yet.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Thank
But
you.
we're showing them why it's important. We're teaching them why these behaviors matter. So it's okay. I know that's a little bit scary sometimes. Like, aren't I teaching this problem? But like, no, if your child is neurotypically developing, they will develop into understanding why those behaviors are important to them, or they won't, and they might move out and have a terribly messy room, and that's fine too. But they will figure out what's valuable to them and they will continue it. Okay. These are punishment techniques. These are the only ones I would use, to be honest. So I would fit your punishment or your consequences when you meet as a family or you create a contract. I would fit your punishments into these categories. If you're going further than this, like spanking or any sort of corporal type punishment or anything more intense or extreme, it's probably not a great way to teach. It's probably going to be more detrimental than helpful. Punishment is not the best way to change behavior. Reinforcement is a lot more effective. But if you're going to have some built-in consequences, which we probably all need to kind of have in our homes, we want to make sure that they are mild and that they are in these categories that are non-emotional and non-damaging. Yes.
Okay, so have you ever heard of consequence, Will?
Yes.
And what are your opinions? Like, is that okay to have them choose their consequence?
I would.
Or is that like still that's too much?
It's too much attention in the moment is the problem. Okay. So here's the thing: in the moment, your kid breaks a rule or does something, then it's like, how are you going to get them over to the consequence? Will, how are you going to talk to them about it and spinning it, etc.? That's all attention. I've now withdrawn my attention from the kids who are behaving, and I'm giving this kid a bunch of attention. Nope, you're done. However, like, you can have them pre-establish their consequences. Like, hey, okay, for Jimmy, what's the consequence going to be for you, buddy, if you do this? So, okay, then you're going to do.
But
like,
you would recommend like having a pre-discussion
yes.
about their consequences.
Yeah.
So you can expect it.
Yes. For example, one of my kids, an apology letter or a think sheet is like a nightmare. He is like, that is the worst thing you can do to me. So I'm like, okay, then how about a service task or a chore? Right? So it doesn't have to be like the worst thing you can apply to your child. It can be like, okay, so you absolutely hate that, and it's probably going to be a huge battle for us and a relationship issue. Maybe that's not the perfect consequence for you. What's something else that you can agree that is going to be the consequence for this behavior? And so when I let you know that that's happening, you know that you've already agreed to that. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would pre-establish it, because then we don't have to have discussions. We don't have to have any choosing. We don't have to have any of that except for ahead of time.
We've done like a job jar, not consistently lately, but where we just have a set of jobs that are easy.
Love it.
That they can just like pull.
Yeah.
And whenever they're ready and calm, they just know they have to do that before they can watch TV or something.
Yeah.
Like,
I like that.
You're still getting jobs done.
Yeah, and it's after something.
And it's still varied. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
like it's a variety, or there's a little bit of, mystery or change with it, which is nice. But these are things that maybe you put in place that they, like you said, they have to accomplish or do before they return to, normal access and privilege, right? Yeah. So you want to just think about, like, these would be the things that you want to establish for those non-negotiables. If your teenager doesn't turn in their phone, what are we going to do with some of this?
We're over time.
Okay, I am almost done, I think. Be careful with punishment. Punishment can get really dangerous because it can damage relationship. It can increase aggression. One of the big things is you can be modeling poor behavior, right? If I'm spanking, to try and get my kid to not be aggressive, you're modeling poor behavior. So be careful with, like, how are we doing a punishment? What's it look like? Is it really going to be teaching? So just be cautious that, like, punishment needs to be carefully done. Make sure you're viewing maladaptive behavior as skill deficits, and you're targeting those skills. What are you doing to teach the skill that your kid does not have? Problem behavior is a skill deficit. There is a skill that your kid doesn't have well established or well generalized yet. And then inappropriate behavior, that mouthy, disrespectful, talking back kind of behavior, that is just typically unmet needs. Think about what the need is and a better way to, I need to change that to kids, child or student, but a better way to fulfill that need. Now, not in the moment, right? Not in the moment. I'm not giving you affection and validation in the moment, but I need to analyze, gosh, how we need to make sure we fill this kid's need, because it seems like there is an unmet need there. Okay. These are some things you might want to do to try to avoid using punishment. If these are in place, you're punishing, and negative consequences won't need to be used as much. So watch for these things and try to have them happening to try to avoid the use of punishment. Punishment should be pretty rare. Number 5 rule is supervise and stay close. I chose this picture because we're going to do this no matter what, they like it or not. Okay, we're going to supervise and stay close no matter if they want it or not, because I have lots of parents say, well, my kid doesn't like affection, my kid doesn't like attention, my kid doesn't like conversation. We're going to do it anyway because we are staying close to our kids. We are building a relationship. We are going to tell them it's not a choice. We are going to be affectionate. We're going to touch. Affection is super important. Kids need it. They don't want it. They don't think they need it, but it's really important for their brain. We're going to be engaged with them. We're going to know what their daily routine is like. If you are, I say be present during their daily routine and transitions. That doesn't mean you're always present when they get home. I'm a working mom. I'm not present when they get home, but I'm present in the sense that I have established with them exactly what that looks like. I have established and created checklists. They know what that is. They know my expectations. So I'm present and I'm following up when I get home. So be engaged with that. Be engaged with their schoolwork. Follow up and follow through. Be very on top of your kids and be engaging and showing up. Be in the shared areas of the home as much as possible. If you are in your bedroom for most of the afternoon or evening, you are not monitoring any of the behavior and you are not able to manage this, and you're not able to manage following the rules and establishing and teaching these things to your kids. So a lot of behavior doesn't get better. So you need to be out in the shared areas of the home. You need to be doing this, supervising, listening, watching, jumping on things, and correcting. Know your kids' friends, get involved, get up in their business. Even if they don't like it, get up in their business. I'm your mom, I'm getting in your business. Sorry, I want to know these things. I want to ask questions. I'm making intentional efforts to have a relationship and stay on top of supporting you. Any questions on that? Okay, just a few things that are important before we end. We are accepting our child. We're accepting who they are. We're not changing their personality or their identity. We're accepting of them. What we're not always accepting is their behavior. Okay, so we're changing behavior and we're building skill, but we're accepting that child. It's never about them. It's never about who they are or their personality. It's just about skills that we're building and behavior that is just not okay. Okay, like I said, it's going to get probably worse before it gets better. Never shield your children from the responsibility of the consequences of their behavior. They do not need your rescuing. They do not need your shielding. Consequences are teaching and they're very important. So don't shield them from it. It is hard to watch our kids be uncomfortable. It is hard to watch them suffer through a consequence, but we need to support them, not shield them from it. I can be there for you. I can support and help you, but this is happening because you made some choices that are not good. Support the institutions of society that are dispersing consequences. If your child gets in trouble with the law, you need to be supporting the consequences that are in place in society. You're still there to support your kid, but you're not trying to shield or take away that consequence. Those are part of why we're teaching kids. And like I said, your home and childhood under 18 is the best time for them to learn some of this. Because once they're not a child and they're over 18, it's really, really painful, difficult consequences. So some of that is really hard to support the institutions dispersing consequences to your kid, but it's important that we do that because this is the time they learn. That includes your school. If the school is suspending or the school is, handing out, dispersing some sort of consequence to your child, it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to come in and meet, but you need to be supportive of that. It's a teaching process. It is not a punishment process. And then if you're worried about your child, whether the behavior or the emotional outburst or the tantruming or the crying or the devastation is anxiety, or is it discomfort with change or dislike of not being in charge? If you're worried about how do I know if am I making my kid anxious, imposing these consequences or following through with this? I don't want to increase their anxiety. And if your child has anxiety, that's a very valid concern. But how you know that it's not anxiety or how you work through that anxiety is that you are clear and upfront and transparent. So if everything is clearly explained and the child understands what's going to happen, and then your follow through matches what was explained and you're consistent, then that's not anxiety. That's a child who's uncomfortable with change or doesn't like not being in charge. And they're going to really be crying and devastated. You're so hurtful and I'm so anxious. But you have to be careful of that because kids are super smart and they learn how to get out of consequences by claiming that they're anxious or nervous or afraid. And we can be very supportive and still follow through. Like, this is uncomfortable. You don't like being in charge. This is hard because you've done something that's going to have a consequence and you don't like that, but you can handle it, right? You can do hard things. We've talked about this and we established this before. Like, that's the thing, is we've been very clear. We've been very transparent. Anxiety comes from not knowing what's going to happen, from unpredictability, from not understanding. That's super different. So if you have any concerns about that, come and meet with me and I'll help you with your kid. That's it.
Hey.
Class, that was great.
Thank you for sorry, I always do so much because I want to give you so much information. But if you have individualized cases you want to like look at, or your child you want to like analyze or have any support or help in establishing any of this, I'm always willing to meet with parents and help you with this process.